one of the first things that you want to know about infographics is that in the reading test, you're going to have two passages that have associated infographics, okay? Could either be one of the science passages and the social science passage, or both of the science passages, right? So in this test, for example, this is the social science passage, and it's got an infographic associated with it. And this next one, this third passage, is the science passage, and it's also got an infographic associated with it, right? Now, one thing to think about when you're dealing with infographics is if you're running out of time on a test, these could be great questions to answer because they're fairly direct in a lot of cases. And in many cases, you only really need the information from the graphic in order to answer the questions. So for instance, here, if we look at question 19, notice how this says according to the graph, right? And that tells us that we only need to use the graph in order to answer it. We don't actually need to read the passage, which is pretty nice, honestly, especially if we're running out of time and we need to zoom into a question that we feel confident that we can answer, okay? Let's talk about some more strategies. We're gonna look at Meltzer's Guide to SAT Reading, the chapter on infographics, and we'll just emphasize some key points in this chapter. First of all, as we said, we can answer a lot of these questions on the basis of the graph or chart alone, right? That was a key point that we just made. So we don't even need to think about the passage as we're answering them. So we've got three types of these questions. The questions that require the graph only, and those are the ones that we were just looking at. Questions that refer to both the graph and the passage, but we can still only really need to use one or the other, either the graph or the passage. And then the questions that require both, the third group, and that's going to be the most difficult group, okay? Because we're going to have to reference we're going to have to go back into the passage and reference the passage. But make sure that, with the questions that are for the graph only, make sure you're not really going back and referencing the passage, because that's just going to be a waste of time, honestly. All right, so a couple of key things to keep in mind as you're looking at the graphs on the SAT. One big thing that I would say to begin with is that typically the graphs are supporting the information present in the passage in general, okay? Now, there may be data points in the graph that kind of go against what the passage is saying, but it's typically, that's restricted to like one data point, right? It's not the graph as a whole that's contrasting with the information present in the passage. So I would just put it like that. And once you've got an idea for the main idea of the passage, the main idea of the graph is probably going to be pretty similar. So one way that we can approach these graphs is kind of skimming them. And it may be a good idea if graph questions are giving you a lot of trouble to kind of get a sense of what the graph's trying to show you before you go into the graph questions, right? So things to think about. What is the shape of the graph? Is it going up? Is it going down? Or is it going up and down, right? Is it a steady change, or is there a big jump, right? Where's the jump, if there is a jump? Is there an outlier point that's very different than the other moments in the graph? And is there any situation where the graph is just staying flat?